Matthew Anderson is the next person, another Presbyterian. And this is an amazing guy. In a few days, I've got a sermon I preached going up about him. And so stick around for that premiere. He lived 1845 to 1928. He was actually born in a relatively well-to-do family, and his family was a free family and even had a stop on the Underground Railroad. And so he chose to do ministry early, but he was kind of coddled, honestly, in his younger life. But when he left for college in 1863 and went to 2 Ohio schools started by abolitionists, specifically Iberia and Oberlin, it's kind of when he woke up. He had a number of things that happened to him in the Cleveland area that woke him up. And I'm not going to get into all those, but he eventually landed along with Grimke at Princeton. He arrived there on October 14th, 1874, and he had a letter in his hand. And Dr. Alexander McGill didn't know that... He didn't know Anderson was black prior to this, and so he didn't know it was Anderson. So he thought he was looking for work, and Anderson says, "No, I'm Matthew Anderson." And so they say, "Well, maybe you should live in this local black boarding house, and so you'd be more comfortable there." And Anderson says, "I didn't come to school to be entertained. Give me a place on campus," because they're trying not to have a black student in the dorms. That's what was going on. So they gave him a room which had been a storage room. But, and this is one of the few times you see a little bit of justice, a white classmate complained about this. So whoever that guy is, thank you, complained, why are you giving a student the storage room? So they gave him a better room. He was the first black student to live in the dormitories at Princeton Theological Seminary. So sort of miniature trailblazers little by little, And he was in a class with Dr. James McCosh, who was the president of Princeton, and a lot of the Southern students didn't want to go to school with a black man. And so they striked and threatened to boycott the class. And McCosh told the Southern students, "You can stay or leave, but I'm not going to ban the black students." So the protesting students begrudgingly came back. But imagine having to face this kind of stuff in school. He eventually graduated in 1877 and then began a Sunday school in January 1878 in Philadelphia, where he began to go to minister. He had a number of other offers, but his heart was called to Philly at this time, and he went about raising money for what he wanted to build, which was a church. And he had some very interesting stories. One time he went in, and a lady just gave him a quarter, and he said, "I'm not going to take that." And then he wrote her a letter, and then after she received the letter, she gave him a much more generous gift. Another time, Anderson went in, and a prominent white gentleman gave him a check, but he made it out to Anderson's white friend. Anderson returned the check and said, "If you can't bear to write it out to me, then I'm not going to take your money." And the man apologized and wrote out the check to Anderson himself. I love stories like that. Not the bad part of it, but Anderson standing up for what was right there. That's good. But he still faced blatant racism. One Presbyterian elder said this to him, quote, "I must tell you frankly that I am losing interest in your race. Most of the leaders of your people are very assertive. They want to be the social equal of white people. Ooh, shame on them. It's just listen to these people. You have come here and look how you have introduced yourself to me. You said I am Mr. Anderson. Now, what do you mean by that? You mean simply that you are my social equal and I don't care to have anything to do with a colored man that uses such assertiveness?" Because he said he's Mr. Anderson. But this is in Philadelphia, the benighted Northerners. But this is what's going on, right? And one pastor told him this. Listen to this. I hate reading this. Actually, no, this isn't a... Yeah, this is not a pastor. This is a philanthropist. But he told this to Matthew Anderson, the pastor. Listen to this. "Your people have been placed by providence in a certain niche. And in that niche, they have to work out their own salvation, and they should be content." He's saying basically, accept your place in life. God put you there. And so he wrote him a letter, this philanthropist. He wrote him a letter putting the guy in his place. And guess what? The guy made a generous donation to the work that Matthew Anderson was doing. I love this. So they laid a cornerstone for a new building in September of 1883, dedicated the building when it was debt-free in 1890, and it's called the Berean Presbyterian Church. You can look it up. And guess what? You might think people are happy. He did this himself. You know what I mean by himself, right? But not happy. Listen to these complaints. There's critics who said black people were too emotional to be Presbyterians, They should probably be Methodist or Baptist instead. And one Presbyterian pastor was outraged. Listen to this. He said it was an outrage to put up such an elegant structure for a congregation of poor blacks. And listen to what Anderson said in response. It was Judas who bemoaned the waste of spikenard, and his spirit is not dead yet. That's good. Now, he got involved with social work as a Christian minister. Started a private kindergarten because there's no black kindergartens in Philadelphia at the time. And then black folks couldn't get loans for homes because of racist lending policies. So he urged community leaders who had money to establish a bank that would meet black people's needs called the Berean Building and Loan Association. It got bought up later. And then he knew that black folks faced discrimination when they would go on vacation. How awful is that? So he started something called the Berean Cottage in New Jersey, which was a summer resort for black couples. And in 1899, he started the Berean Institute, which is a vocational school to train black folks. He also started an employment service, and he would have annual conventions to commemorate black achievement. And well, the list goes on. There's a number of other things that he did. And this is one quote I'm going to read from him here, and then we're going to go on to the next guy, because I have a sermon coming out in Anderson anyway you can check out. Quote, now from the conception of the gospel ministry, which I hold, I could never believe that the work of a gospel minister was simply preaching in the commonly accepted sense of the term, but that it included everything, which tended to the development of the whole man, intellectual, moral, and spiritual. Hear that? And he quoted, he talked about the condition his people face, and he said this: a people who have been thus shamefully wronged and who are yet far from having their just rights accorded need more than sermons on the Sabbath. They need encouragement in everything that will tend to the development of true man and womanhood. They need help in the practical things of life, end quote. But I like him, he did both. And you just can't beat guys like this. In fact, his whole family was one of achievers. His wife was one of the first black women to become a physician. And there's a man who's a retired professor named James Trotman, and I've been able to speak to Dr. Trotman, and he's working on a biography of Anderson, and he said it's almost complete. Pray for Dr. Trotman to finish his biography on Matthew Anderson. I hope that he does.